people really need to learn and understand. So you have all these tests that you know how to do, all this equipment you know how to use, and then your first day in the dealership, someone hands you a job, and you're like, I don't know I don't know, where's the instructions on how to do this?
Yeah. And so you bring up a great point, kind of getting into the job. Before we get into the job, point number 3, we'll get into starting salary or starting pay. So at a dealership level, what is kind of what someone could expect if they were an entry technician at a dealership for pay?
This is, of course, going to vary across the board.
Yeah.
We tend to start our Service Express guys, which is oil change, tire rotation, really light work, in the $10 to $13 range. And the cool thing about that is it's just you come in and we teach you how to do it. Technicians that have some experience, we usually bump them up, a couple bucks more depending on their experience. And then I would say once you've achieved a certain level of experience, 3 years or so, then it's not uncommon, I think, to hit in the $20 per hour. Now that's $20 flat rate per hour, so that's not just straight a $20 an hour salary.
Right. It depends on the work that you accomplish.
Exactly, you affect your overall pay quite a bit.
So for where I went, it was fairly common to just kind of go with like industry standard. And so if you look up, you can just like literally Google average mechanical starting salary for mechanical engineering. And when I started, that was about 60 grand was like average starting salary for mechanical engineer. And that's probably gone up a little bit in the past few years. And then if you have a master's degree on top of that, typically it's going to be about a $5,000 to $10,000 pay bump on top of it. And you of course miss out a year of work, but then you start in at a higher rate, or 2 years of work if, depending on the master's program. So starting salary for mechanical engineers, exceptionally good, probably one of the biggest perks of the job, because there's a lot of stress related to it. But we will move on to the job requirements and kind of the what you actually do at the job.
So the job requirements from stepping your foot in the door on your first day is actually one of the negatives for being a technician or a mechanic, whatever you prefer, because as you see this toolbox behind us here, you basically need a box full of tools before you can roll in the door. And I think
your equivalent of the college tuition.
Exactly. My first year of buying tools, I had some tools going in. I spent well over $5,000 in just the bare essentials that I need. And, the good thing about it is for a while, it starts to dwindle down, but then as you get to be a higher level technician, that starts to ramp back up.
You get specialty tools again.
Then you start having to buy the very expensive, use a couple of times a year type tools. So I would say the tools are probably the thing that most people really don't consider, that you really do have to spend a crap ton of money just to sort of come in the building in the morning.
And like the crappy thing, it's not crappy, it's nice, but like from the engineering side, it's like, hey, we need this tool, and you write a note and you give it to your boss and they sign it. And
so all you need to come into work in the morning is a pen and preferably to be clothed, depending on where you work.
So getting into kind of the job requirements, from when I first started working at this forklift company, I was an applications engineer, and it was kind of much more so marketing based, because they wanted me to kind of use my passion for teaching to teach our dealers. But I also worked on, one of my first projects was design a cooling system for this electric truck, this electric forklift. And so I was on this team, and I got to work with 2 other people on the team, and I was in charge of the cooling system. So that was one of the projects. And going into it, like, one of the things I think that you should know about engineering is you'll kind of just get thrown into it, much like you did. You just get thrown into it, and it's just kind of like, do it. And you're like,
you'll learn along the way.
I don't know how to design a cooling system. And I know way more now about cooling systems, but that was my first task. And so you reach out for help and you do your research and you figure it out, and it gets done eventually. And then very quickly you become an expert. And so this was another thing that I found interesting about the engineering world is, once you do something one time, like I designed a cooling system for this truck with the help of 2 other people, it was like, oh, Jason's an expert on radiators. And it was like, no, I did that once, and I liked it, but I don't necessarily want to be a radiator guy for the rest of my life. And that can easily happen in the engineering world, whereas if you work on one project and you do a nice job with it, you may pigeonhole yourself into that. But you can also, if you're good, show, hey, this is what I've done, and step up very quickly and move within the company very quickly. So within a year and a half, I'd switched positions to a test engineer job, And that's probably like the coolest engineering position in my opinion, where it combines what you do and what a typical engineer does who's just sitting on a computer designing stuff, where we actually built a forklift from the ground up. So just me and one technician worked alongside, and in 6 months, we started with metal plates, and after 6 months, we had a moving, working forklift,
Nice.
and then I quit my job. But I did get to drive it right before we quit. But that was really cool
Right.
because I got the hands-on part. I got to just order my tools, and
Must be nice.
yeah, it was pretty awesome. I didn't keep them though. I mean,
Well,
there's that.
that is
so
one
it would be
benefit
nice to
on
have
the-
them in my
on the
garage
technician
now
end.
that I've quit.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely some perks to it. So advantages and disadvantages, you would say, to being a technician.
You know, you sort of touched on one. One of the advantages of having to have all those tools coming in is you have all those tools going out.
Yep.
And it's great to be able to understand that, you know, if you need to leave a job for whatever reason, you just lock your toolbox and you can roll it, you know, wherever you need to. Also, good technicians are always in demand. Good technicians a lot of times can write their own paychecks. Good technicians also tend to build their own customer base, so that customer base generally comes along with them wherever they go, especially if it's a local
Yeah,
place.
that makes sense.
Dealer A to dealer B across town, you're going to bring a lot of those customers with you, and it's cool. It's cool to have customers that you've worked on, you know, 5 of their cars, and
Right.
now they're 16-year-olds getting a car, and you're helping them pick a car.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Some of the disadvantages, this is a really hard job. It's a lot harder of a job than people really give it credit for. You know, the idea is that the high school dropout becomes a mechanic.